There are nights that mark a pilot's life forever. Nights when you realize your profession goes far beyond transporting people from one place to another. I'm Captain Richard Anderson. I've been flying corporate jets for 15 years, and this is the story of the flight that completely changed my perspective on what it means to be responsible for human lives. A story about hope, courage, and how sometimes we need to fly beyond our limits to make a difference in someone's life. It was a Tuesday, March 15th, when my cell phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was at home watching a movie with my wife when I saw the operations center number. Calls at that hour were never good news. "Captain Anderson, we have a medical emergency," said the tense voice of the coordinator. 7-year-old child in critical condition in Atlanta, Georgia. Needs to be transported urgently to Children's Hospital of Chicago. Can you fly tonight? I felt my stomach tighten. I looked out the window. The weather wasn't favorable. A cold front was approaching the Midwest with severe thunderstorm forecasts. I had checked the weather reports earlier and knew it would be a challenging night to fly. But when it comes to saving a child's life, the answer is always the same. "I'll be at the airport in an hour," I replied without hesitation. My wife looked at me with that expression that only someone married to a pilot knows, a mixture of pride, concern, and resignation. "Be careful," she whispered, kissing my forehead. On the way to the airport, I called Gabriel, my co-pilot for almost 5 years. He was young, just 28 years old, but extremely competent and reliable. "Gabe, prep the aircraft and file the flight plan to Atlanta. It's going to be a long night." "Already on my way, Captain. I saw the weather forecast." "It's rough, but we can do this," he responded with his characteristic confidence. Our aircraft was a Cessna Citation XLS Plus, capable of transporting up to 9 passengers, perfectly suited for this type of medical mission. A reliable machine with excellent high-altitude performance and redundant safety systems. Exactly what we needed for a mission like this. 40 minutes later, I was at the hangar doing the pre-flight inspection under a light drizzle that was starting to fall. Every detail mattered: checking control surfaces, fuel level, hydraulic systems, emergency equipment. Gabriel arrived shortly after, along with the medical team that would accompany the transport. The team consisted of Dr. Robert, a pediatric intensivist with 20 years of experience, and Nurse Christina, a specialist in air medical transport. They carried equipment that would transform our cabin into a flying ICU. While the medical team prepared the equipment, I received more details about the patient. The child's name was Anna Claire. Severe pneumonia that had evolved to sepsis within hours. The doctors in Atlanta had done everything they could, but she needed specialized care that could only be found in Chicago. Her oxygen saturation was dropping, blood pressure unstable, and her kidneys were beginning to show signs of failure. "Captain," said Dr. Roberts seriously, "I'm not going to lie to you. We're racing against time. Every minute we lose significantly reduces her chances. Every minute counted, and I could feel the weight of that responsibility." We took off from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 2:15 a.m. under an overcast sky. Anna Claire was stabilized on the medical equipment, but I could see from Dr. Roberts' expression that the situation was more serious than I had imagined. Every 15 minutes he checked the vital signs and shook his head with concern. The first 300 miles passed without major problems. We were flying at 37,000 feet with calm winds, and for a moment I thought maybe we'd have luck with the weather. But as we approached the Ohio Valley, the weather situation began to deteriorate rapidly. "Captain, we're receiving severe thunderstorm alerts on our route," Gabriel informed, monitoring the weather radar. "Very extensive system, cells with intense electrical activity." The radar images didn't lie. A true wall of convective cells was forming exactly in our path, extending for hundreds of miles from north to south. Thunderstorms with tops above 45,000 feet, red echoes indicating hail, constant lightning cutting through the night like malicious fireworks, and winds that could easily destroy an aircraft of our size. I grabbed the microphone and made contact with Chicago Center. Chicago Center, citation N123XY, requesting vectors to deviate around the thunderstorm system ahead. Citation N123XY, negative for deviation. All airspace between Indianapolis and Louisville is compromised by severe convective activity. We suggest emergency landing in Indianapolis and wait for conditions to improve. I requested authorization to deviate the route, but the flight controller informed us that the entire region between Indiana and Kentucky was covered by thunderstorms. There was no way around. We would have to wait on the ground for at least 6 hours, maybe until dawn. That's when I heard the doctor's voice over the intercom. "Captain, the child is getting worse. Blood pressure is dropping, and her kidneys are beginning to fail. We don't have 6 hours. If we don't get to Chicago in the next 2.5 hours..." He didn't need to complete the sentence. We all understood. I remained silent for a few seconds, weighing the options. On one side, operational safety protocols, 15 years of career built on prudent decisions. On the other, a 7-year-old child whose life depended on my decision in the next few seconds. I looked at Gabriel. He knew exactly what I was thinking. "Captain," he said quietly, "she has kids the same age. If it were them..." "Dr. Robert," I called over the intercom, "listen to me carefully. I'm going to try to get through this thunderstorm system, but I need you to be prepared for severe turbulence. Very severe. Can you keep the child stabilized?" "Captain, we'll do whatever it takes. She needs to get to Chicago alive." If you're enjoying this story of courage in the skies, don't forget to subscribe to Black Box channel so you won't miss our next aviation stories. I made a decision that, looking back now, was one of the riskiest in my career, but also the most necessary. We were going to cross the storm. Gabriel, we're going to climb to 42,000 feet and try to get over the cells, reduce speed for severe turbulence, and activate the attention signals for passengers, I announced. "Folks back there, fasten your seatbelts and hold on. This is going to be a ride you'll never forget." During the climb, I carefully studied the radar images. There was a slightly less intense area about 40 nautical miles north of our planned route. It wasn't exactly a clear corridor, but maybe it was our best chance. "Chicago Center, citation N123XY, requesting authorization to proceed en route with authorized deviation north as necessary to avoid more severe cells." There was a long pause on the radio. I knew the controller was consulting his supervisor. Finally, "Citation N1123XY, authorized to proceed at your own risk. Maintain continuous monitoring on this frequency. At your own risk." Those words echoed in my mind as we initiated penetration into the thunderstorm system. The Citation XLS Plus is an incredible machine, but even it has its limits. As we gained altitude, turbulence increased progressively. The aircraft swayed violently, instruments vibrated, and I could hear the metallic groans of stress from the structure. In the passenger cabin, I could hear Dr. Robert trying to keep Anna Claire stable while the medical equipment oscillated dangerously. At 40,000 feet, we entered the first storm cell. The world exploded in light and sound around us. It was like being inside an electric volcano. Lightning cut through the sky in all directions, some so close they completely illuminated the cabin for entire seconds. Rain hit the windshield like ice projectiles, and turbulence was so intense that at times I completely lost visual control of the instruments. The aircraft climbed and descended violently, like an out-of-control elevator. In one of the strongest gusts, we lost almost 1,500 feet of altitude in less than 20 seconds. My arms ached from the effort of keeping the controls stable. "Captain, we're losing altitude rapidly," Gabriel shouted over the deafening noise. "The downdrafts are too strong." Behind us, I could hear Dr. Robert struggling to keep Anna Claire stable. "Saturation dropped to 78%. I need to increase the oxygen." The downdrafts inside the cloud were stronger than I had imagined. No matter how much I pulled the controls and increased engine power, the aircraft continued descending. I turned right, trying to find a less turbulent area, navigating between the most intense cells using only the weather radar. That's when I saw something on the radar that chilled my blood. We were flying directly toward a supercell, a gigantic storm with an extremely active core. I tried to go around to the left, but that's when something happened that I'll never forget. Lightning struck our aircraft. The sound was like a nuclear explosion next to my ears. A blinding flash filled the entire cabin. All the lights went out for a second that seemed like an eternity, then returned intermittently, flashing like a defective Christmas tree. Several alarms began sounding simultaneously on the panel, a metallic chorus of warnings competing with the roar of the storm outside. The smell of ozone and burned electronic components invaded the cabin. I felt my heart race as I quickly scanned all the instruments. "Gabriel, check the systems." "Complete status," I ordered, fighting to keep the aircraft stabilized while my co-pilot ran an emergency check. "Captain, we lost autopilot. The right engine anti-ice system is failed. GPS navigation completely unstable and..." He paused, checking more displays. "And we have indication of pressurization system failure." My blood froze. Pressurization failure at 40,000 feet meant we had few minutes before lack of oxygen would leave us unconscious. And we still had a critically ill child who depended on us. "Oxygen masks now. Depressurization emergency," I shouted over the intercom while initiating an emergency descent. The masks automatically dropped in the passenger cabin. I could hear Dr. Robert trying to put the mask on Anna Claire while keeping the medical equipment functioning. "Captain, I need controlled descent. I can't lose her now." We were flying blind in the middle of a severe thunderstorm, with a dying child in the passenger cabin, critical systems compromised, and we still had over 400 miles ahead to Chicago. And now, without adequate pressurization, we had to descend to a lower altitude, exactly where the storms were most intense. For a moment, the weight of responsibility almost crushed me. It was little Anna Claire's life in my hands. Her family trusted me to take her safely to the treatment that could save her. I couldn't give up. That's when I remembered my instructor's teachings from the Air Force. When everything seems lost, go back to basics. Trust your instruments, trust your training, and never lose faith. I needed to solve the problems one at a time by order of priority. First, depressurization. We initiated an emergency descent to 25,000 feet, where we could fly without oxygen masks. Second, navigation. I turned off all automated systems that were failed and took complete manual control of the aircraft. Without reliable GPS, I would navigate using only the magnetic compass and basic flight instruments. It was like flying in the 1950s, but I had been trained for this. Gabriel tuned the emergency frequency and tried to re-establish communication with some control center. And monitor the anti-ice system closely. "If we lose the other engine, we're in serious trouble," I instructed, keeping my eyes fixed on the artificial horizon while calculating our estimated position. The descent through the loaded clouds was a nightmare. At 30,000 feet, we began forming ice on the wings again. At 28,000, the air currents became even more violent. At 25,000, we finally managed to stabilize pressurization, but we were right in the heart of the most intense turbulence zone. "Captain," Dr. Robert shouted over the intercom, "she's going into cardiac arrest." I felt my world collapse. Here I was, fighting against a monstrous storm to save this child's life, and she was dying right behind me. I could hear the sound of the defibrillator being charged, the urgent instructions between the doctor and nurse. "Not now," I murmured to myself, "not when we're so close." I made a desperate decision. I increased engine power beyond recommended limits and put the aircraft in an almost vertical trajectory through an opening I had spotted on the radar, a small window between two supercells that was moving rapidly. "Gabriel, monitor engine temperatures. I'm pushing the machine beyond limits." "Captain, temperature in the yellow and climbing." For 3 eternal minutes, we flew in a corridor only 5 miles wide between two gigantic storms. It was like navigating between two moving mountains, each capable of destroying us with a simple wrong move. Minute after minute, we navigated through the meteorological hell, using only experience and intuition, accumulated over thousands of flight hours. Every heading decision was crucial. Too far left, and we could enter an even more severe cell. Too far right, and we would stray too far from the route, consuming precious fuel we might not have. "Captain," I heard Dr. Robert's relieved voice. "We got her stabilized, heart rhythm returning to normal." I felt a wave of relief course through my body, but I knew it wasn't over yet. After an hour and 12 minutes that seemed like an eternity, we finally began to exit the storm system. Turbulence gradually diminished, lightning became more sporadic on the horizon, and Gabriel managed to re-establish radio contact with Chicago approach control. Chicago approach, citation N123XY medical emergency with multiple system failures, requesting absolute priority for landing at O'Hare, I transmitted, my voice hoarse from tension. Citation N123XY, understood. You are cleared direct to the airport. Descend at your discretion. Fire trucks, ambulance and emergency team are already on standby. Report the nature of the failures. Chicago, we had lightning strike with failures in autopilot, navigation, partial anti-ice and pressurization system. Transporting child in critical condition. Copy citation. Maximum priority authorized. All other traffic is being diverted. But our problems still weren't completely over. The anti-ice system had failed during the storm, and as we descended through the low, dense clouds over Chicago, we began accumulating ice on the wings again. With the additional weight and loss of lift, the aircraft was becoming increasingly difficult to control. Is this story touching you? Leave a comment telling us if you've ever been through a critical situation. And don't forget to hit the bell to receive notifications of our stories. Captain, we're very heavy, Gabriel alerted, monitoring the performance instruments. Stall speed increased by almost 20 knots with all this ice. I knew I needed to make a risky decision. With O'Hare's relatively long runway, 13,000 feet, but our compromised conditions, a normal landing would be extremely dangerous. The ice on the wings completely altered the aircraft's flight characteristics. I needed to lose altitude quickly to get out of the icing zone, but that would mean a very steep and unconventional approach. Gabriel, we're going to make a non-standard emergency approach. Reduce to higher approach speed to compensate for ice, flaps in landing configuration, and prepare for an aggressive descent. We're going to descend almost like a fighter jet. I looked at the altimeter, 12,000 feet and descending. The normal approach to O'Hare would begin at 6,000 feet, but I knew we would need a much steeper trajectory to avoid more ice formation. I initiated a steep descent at almost 4,500 feet per minute, almost double normal, but it was our only chance to get out of the ice zone before the situation became irrecoverable. The aircraft vibrated with the elevated speed, and I could feel the increased resistance of ice on the control surfaces. Captain, Dr. Robert called again. Anna Claire is responding well to treatment, but needs to get to the hospital in maximum 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That was exactly the time we would have if we could land on the first attempt. The lights of the great city of Chicago began to appear through the low clouds like saving stars. Never had a sight seemed so beautiful and challenging at the same time. The metropolis extended to the horizon, but our attention was focused only on the lights of runway 10R at O'Hare, which shone like a beacon of hope in the darkness. At 6:08 a.m., with reduced visibility from persistent rain and crosswinds of almost 25 mph, I initiated the final approach. The ice on the wings created a constant vibration in the controls, and I needed almost double the normal force to keep the aircraft aligned. Citation N123XY. You are cleared to land. Wind 240 degrees, 30 knots, gusts to 42. Runway wet, reduced friction coefficient, the tower controller informed. Tower understood. N123XY final for 10R. Is this story moving you as much as it moved me to live it? Share in the comments and don't forget to hit the bell to receive notifications of our next aviation stories. Gabriel gripped his seat firmly while I fought with the controls. The final approach was an exercise in surgical precision. My 15 years of experience were put to the test in those crucial final 5 minutes. At 500 feet from the ground, a crosswind gust almost took us out of runway alignment. I corrected quickly with aileron and rudder, feeling the aircraft respond heavily due to accumulated ice. At 200 feet, another gust, this time even stronger. The aircraft tilted dangerously to the right. At 100 feet, I managed to re-establish perfect alignment with the runway. At 50 feet, I cut power and gently pulled the yoke, feeling the aircraft resist due to extra weight. Compensating for crosswind with aileron and rudder, controlling speed with millimetric precision, and fighting against the extra weight of ice, I managed to touch down surprisingly smoothly at 612. The main gear touched first, then the nose gear, and I immediately engaged reverse thrust and brakes. Never had the sound of tires touching wet asphalt sounded so wonderful. Never had I felt such relief in my entire career. "Landing accomplished safely," I announced over the intercom, and heard a collective sigh of relief from the entire crew. In the passenger cabin, Anna Claire slept peacefully, connected to the equipment that had maintained her life during those intense 5 hours. Dr. Robert gave me a tired smile and thumbs up. She was stable. 15 minutes later, Anna Claire was being taken by ambulance to Children's Hospital of Chicago. Her small hands held a teddy bear that her mother had brought, and for the first time in hours, I saw a weak smile on her pale face. I stayed at the airport until receiving confirmation that she had been admitted to the hospital and was being operated on by the pediatric emergency team. Only then did I allow exhaustion to take over. Gabriel and I went to the company briefing room, where we spent 2 hours reporting every detail of the operation to safety investigators. Every decision was questioned, every procedure analyzed. It was a necessary but painful process. "Captain," said the operations chief at the end of the debriefing, "officially I need to say you took very high calculated risks. Unofficially," he paused and extended his hand, "I'm proud of you. You did what any father would want someone to do for his child." I discovered 3 weeks later that Anna Claire had recovered completely. The surgery was successful, treatment responded as expected, and she was discharged after 15 days of hospitalization. 2 months later, I received a letter. It was from her, or rather dictated to her mother, since she was still learning to write. It said, "Thank you, Captain Richard, for taking me flying in the sky to the doctors who saved me. When I grow up, I want to be a pilot like you to help other children." I read that letter at least 20 times. I kept it in the car's glove compartment on my nightstand at home. Took it on all flights for months. Every word of those crooked lines written by a 7-year-old child was worth more than all the decorations and praise I could receive in life. Today, 2 years later, Anna Claire is a healthy child full of energy. Her mother sends me photos via text from time to time. Anna Claire playing soccer, Anna Claire at school, Anna Claire smiling in the park. Each photo is a reminder of why we do what we do. That night taught me something fundamental about our profession that goes far beyond any operations manual. We pilots are not just operators of flying machines. We are the human links between hope and despair, between the possible and impossible. We carry not just passengers, but dreams, expectations, and sometimes people's very lives. Of course, I could have opted for total safety, wait for the storm to pass, follow all protocols to the letter, avoid any unnecessary risk. It would have been the most prudent decision from an operational standpoint, the one that would guarantee I'd return home without problems. But when you look into the desperate eyes of a mother begging to save her daughter, when you know you possess the skills and experience necessary to try something extraordinary, when a human life depends on your courage, prudence must give way to action. We can't always be heroes. In fact, most of the time we're just professionals doing our job the best way possible. But there's a moment in every pilot's career, sometimes several moments, when we're called to go beyond. Moments when our experience, training, and courage are tested in ways we never imagined during simulator classes. Every time I see a child at the airport today, I remember little Anna Claire and how a single decision can change the course of an entire life. Our responsibility as pilots goes far beyond the pages of operations manuals. It extends to the hearts and hopes of those who trust us to take them to their destinations, whether it's a business trip or a race against death. I learned that night that true heroism isn't in grandiose gestures or seeking recognition. It's in the willingness to put others' lives above our own safety, in the courage to make difficult decisions when everything is against us, and in the humility to recognize that sometimes we are instruments of something much greater than ourselves. Sometimes I wonder how many other stories like this happen silently in skies around the world. How many pilots, at this very moment, are making decisions that could mean the difference between life and death for someone? How many children like Anna Claire are being saved by professionals who risk everything to make a difference? And you who are listening to this story, have you ever stopped to think about the anonymous heroes flying above our heads every day? Have you looked at the sky and imagined the human dramas, the stories of courage, the impossible decisions that happen at 35,000 feet altitude? Next time you're on a flight, Remember that in the cockpit there's someone trained not just to take you to your destination, but to protect your life with their own, if necessary. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need a hero, know that there are people like Gabriel and me flying out there, ready to cross storms for you. If this story of courage and hope touched you as it touched me to live it, subscribe to Black Box channel to follow more real stories from the skies. We have hundreds of stories like this, some heroic, others funny, some mysterious, all real and narrated by those who lived every moment. Share this episode with someone you know, because stories of courage deserve to be told, and because we never know when we might need someone willing to fly through a storm for us. And leave us in the comments. Have you ever experienced a situation where you had to go beyond what you thought possible to help someone? Or do you know a professional who went beyond duty to save you? We want to hear your stories too. Until the next flight, and remember, in the skies every decision matters, every life has value, and sometimes the impossible is just another word for I haven't tried hard enough yet. Thank you for flying with us on Black Box, where every story is a window into the skies of the human soul.